It's finally here. The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered was surprise dropped on the day of Bethesda's press conference. Everyone knew the game was likely coming out soon, but I don't know how many assumed it was going to be right after the broadcast had ended. I certainly didn't. I was working on an OG Oblivion video, and as soon as I heard the news, my heart dropped. I was not prepared to dive into the remake at all, but nevertheless, it's an exciting time and here we all are. The purpose of this video was intended to capture my first impressions, thoughts, emotions, etc. on the remaster, and oh boy, what a roller coaster it's been. All of those feelings and more were indeed expressed, both in a good way and in a bad way. But let's start from the beginning of the game and dive right in. For starters, upon booting up the remake, the main menu is completely different. I don't know why this took me by surprise, but it did. It's not even tweaked or has a fresh paint job, as Virtuous loves to say. It's been entirely altered. Personally, my stance is that I want a game that is Oblivion, but doesn't look or feel like Oblivion. If I wanted that, I'd just continue to play the original. No, I wanted a completely new experience, and so far, so good. Of course, starting a new game prompts the opening cutscene. Normally, you'd see a scene from 2006 that was cutting edge at the time, followed by ones that would have you squinting your eyes. However, that's not the case here. The visuals for this part were absolutely stunning.
These are the closing days of the Third Era, and the final hours of my life.
They didn't change anything in terms of the audio, but the graphics were completely overhauled. It honestly felt more like I was watching a fan edit than an officially licensed Bethesda game. The shots were one for one the same angle, approach, movement, etc., just with standard 2025 AAA gaming graphics. Once the opening was over, I was met with Oblivion's new loading screens. I find them to be very charming. It's a setting of someone's art studio featuring a painting of local structures and landmarks. Surrounding the parchment are odds and ends that you'd find on a medieval artist's desk, or at least what I think you'd find. In any case, it's also a refreshing take on the previously dull loading screens. The very first piece of gameplay is of course the character creation menu. This in of itself has received such a dramatic update to its aesthetics. This is a fresh coat of paint, a new sound system, replaced mirrors, and brand new tires. Other than the new user interface, the other new point of interest that comes from the race menu is your character's origin. You now get to pick your character's backstory and where they're originally from. This also apparently has a slight impact on your base stats, although that's not something that I was able to confirm myself. Each race has two options. For example, Imperials could be from Nibene or Colovia, Argonians from Arnesia or Thornmarsh, and Bretons from Sistris or High Rock. For my test playthrough of the remake, I thought it was fitting to have my character be a Wood Elf, the first race I played as when I tried Oblivion for the first time. For their origin, I went with Grotwood over Reaper's Marsh, as the backstory seemed a lot grittier and hardy. Moving on to the customization portion, I was relieved to see that they left a lot of these specific enhancements. Every little detail on your character's face that could be altered in one way or another was still present. What's more, the hair customization options were actually increased. They added in more unique hairstyles, and beards were finally introduced to the game. I've been wanting some luscious locks on my character's face since forever, and now that's something I can finally do. The color options are also pretty zany and out there, which I love. From here, I was excited to finally tackle the brand new world of Oblivion. And then, my world came crashing down. Listen, my PC is not amazing. It's probably as mid gets. But this game was choppier than an ocean storm. I adjusted all of the graphics settings and played around with resolutions, it just wasn't working out. It was either have a beautiful looking game that ran at 10 FPS, or 15 FPS with subpar visuals. I tried both, and I didn't like either. According to a lot of other players out there, the remake's optimization isn't the greatest. There are people with PCs leagues better than mine, and their frame rates are capping off at 40. So while I knew it was mostly my fault for the poor performance, the game isn't helping me out here either. Most of my time playing, everything was skipping and it looked like I was watching a stop motion movie. At certain times though, things ran a little smoother and I could truly see the beauty in a lot of the little moments. The lighting was fantastic, the updated textures were breathtaking, and the environment was stunning. It was exactly what I had witnessed from the Bethesda broadcast, just with worse frame rates and graphics. I went like this through the entire tutorial section, crossing my fingers that it would get better on the other side, but it only got worse. So, thinking on a moment's notice, I booted up my Xbox, bought Game Pass, and downloaded the remake all over again. A couple hours later, and it was good to go. I set up a temporary screen capture system in place, and everything was already off to a better start. Due to some settings in OBS, there's a bit of screen tearing during the tutorial, but that gets fixed later on. For console, there are only two options for graphics. You can choose quality or performance. For the tutorial section, I went with quality, and you can certainly see that the frame rate struggles with it. The environment looks good, or as good as it can look in comparison to PC, but it's not outstanding. With performance, the frame rate is close to 60 and it doesn't skip as much. However, the trade-off is in the textures and the lighting, as they aren't nearly as dynamic or detailed. I personally prefer a smoother experience over better visuals, but that's just my preference. For the remainder of this playthrough, I went with performance. I'd love to know what you prefer from your own experience, as well as what you'd like to see for the first few remastered videos. I feel as though this whole ordeal was relevant to bring up because it truly was a part of my experience. I spent a good couple of hours troubleshooting how to properly run the game, and it seems like a lot of other people out there had the same issues. I didn't get off on the right foot with the remake, but those troubles are now behind me, and this is what I'm rocking with temporarily. Now, back to my first impressions. First and foremost, the elephants in the room are the updated graphics and textures. In my opinion, that's the hot new attraction for the remaster. Long gone are the days of counting pixels. Now, we get to physically see Cyrodiil from a whole new perspective. The way the light and shadows interact with the environment, the glistening and hyper-realistic textures on NPCs, structures, nature, stones, items, you name it. It's the precise delivery of that quote-unquote new paint job that we were promised. The stories, plots, and concepts are Oblivion in nature, but it feels like you're playing a whole other game. If anything, I almost feel like I'm playing a title like The Witcher 3 or Kingdom Come Deliverance. Everything just has that sort of look. I ended up spending a lot of my time wandering around most of the cities. I didn't hit every single one, but I did visit most of them. The Imperial City and Bruma were hit the hardest by my graphics choices, while Breville, Leeuwin, and Anvil looked stunning. As funny as it sounds, the artificial man-made structures fell behind, while the natural elements, i.e. wood, trees, grass, rocks, etc., were leagues ahead. For a lot of the NPC creatures out there, like vampires, scamps, wolves, rats, and mudcrabs, they're practically unrecognizable. They feel like all new challengers and enemies. Other than optimization and a lack of options for console, I don't have any complaints regarding the visuals of the game, except for maybe one thing. It's not taboo to say that Oblivion's dialogue sequences were rather unique. An awkward zoom in on your target's face and some strange facial expressions to go with it. For the remake, they stuck with the original concept, focusing in on your selected NPC and made it less uncomfortable. The world still freezes around you too, and it's still very intimate, but it's done in better taste. The dialogue prompts and responses are also still the same. The only thing to replace the previous goofiness are the facial expressions. I thought it was just the trailer where the facial movements look strange, but it's very much present in the game too. It's like all of their features operate separate of one another. There's no synergy or rhythm to them. It's off-putting, but in a way, still very true to the original game's nature. It's personally not something that really bothers me, just more so an observation. Staying on topic with NPCs, I was itching to hear the new voiceovers. All orcs, Bosmer, Dunmer, Argonians, Khajiit, and female Bretons should have new voice actors. I only really spoke with a few, but it was pretty surreal to hear all new voices in Oblivion.
Have you been near Rosentia Galenus' house recently? Smells horrible.
I never thought I'd see another friendly face.
Don't be shy, join us, and do well by doing good.
Here, take my copy of the new Black Horse Courier.
Hello, stranger. Luciana Galena.
I have no time for your pathetic attempts at small talk.
By the way, do you happen to know what the fine is here in Cyrodiil for necrophilia? Just asking.
Even the male Imperials have a second voice actor now.
There's been some terrible trouble at the chapel in Anvil.
The Imperial Palace is at the center. The 6 districts are arranged around the palace like spokes of a wheel.
I recognize most of the new voices from other Elder Scrolls installments like Skyrim and ESO. Personally, I welcome the change and the diversity of voices for the remake. It makes the world feel more alive when I hear more than the same 5 or so voices. Don't get me wrong, the original cast will always hold a special place in my heart and are reserved for OG Oblivion. But for the remake, I feel like it's totally acceptable. Next, let's talk about the combat. I've been reading some comments on how the remake has made certain aspects of fighting too easy. The areas of concern were enemies now appearing on the compass, third-person mode receiving a crosshair, and most importantly, the attacking animations are much slower. Tackling that third point first, I 100% agree. The melee combat animations and spellcasting animations seem to be a lot slower. This makes predicting, blocking, and dodging incoming enemy attacks a lot easier. I played as an archer, crawled through the entire Oblivion Gate outside of Kvatch, and I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I took damage. Granted, in the original game, evading most enemy attacks wasn't that difficult either. A simple sidestep in most range cases did the trick. Now, as an aside, hostile archers in this game are deadly. I found avoiding arrows to be actually really tricky, and if anything, they level out the playing field. Overall though, while there's a noticeable difference in the way combat works in the game, i.e. slower movements, full body animations to tip you off, enemy staggering, etc., the original game didn't provide that much more difficulty. Next, let's talk about the third person crosshair. I'm not really sure why this is a complaint, to be honest. This was 100% needed. In fact, because of this addition, I found myself preferring third person mode over first person. I'm sure there's a group of people out there who like the challenge and guessing game of not knowing where your ranged attacks were going to land, and I feel for you. If that was something you really liked about the game, then it's unfortunate that it's gone. But with third person mode now fully accessible, I find it more fun to have that over the shoulder perspective. I get to watch my decked out character carry out their animations, and I find aiming/lining up the crosshair to be easier in third person mode. I'm not sure if that's just me though. Lastly, let's talk about enemies appearing on the compass. This one I'm a little more empathetic towards than the third person spectacle. Part of the dungeon crawling process in Oblivion, at least from my perspective, was not knowing where your enemies were. This made sneaking and exploring a thrilling experience. You didn't know if you were about to run into a room with 1 rat or a hall with 4 bandits. Now you get tipped off as to what's lurking around the corner or what's waiting for you ahead on the road. This feature makes the game more user-friendly for first-time players as well as casuals. Sneaking is simpler and it's faster to steamroll through dungeons. However, it does take away from the challenge and difficulty aspect that some players loved about the original. There's a dichotomy here, and I don't think there's a right or wrong way to feel. To wrap up the combat segment, I understand how a lot of these things add up for some people and it leaves a sour taste in their mouth. It seems like now the only real way to make your playthrough a little more challenging is by gear choice, skill choice, and changing the difficulty. At the same time, it makes way for new and returning players who just want to be immersed in the world and its stories. During my playthrough, I did do a little bit of questing, and honestly, there's not much to comment on there. The quests work and operate in the exact same ways as the original ones, and almost all of the voice acting is the same. Of course, the differences come from the quest journal's new interface, as well as the updated scenery, so fans will be happy to know that not much has changed. One of the questions I've seen some people ask are if any of the original cut content was restored and added into the remake. Unfortunately, there is no 10th major city, such, and the incomplete quests were left as is. To me, it would have been a massive bonus if the team at Virtuous was able to reconstruct those quests, but I can also understand that the extra work needed to do that might have been too much for their plates. Specific voice actors reading new lines, new locations added to the game, creative choices that might have gone against Bethesda's original intentions. For what they set out to do, they did it well, a fresh makeover for Oblivion. But of course, it's still sad to know that there's missing lore and content from the final product. However, I will say the deluxe edition of the game added new quests with unique rewards. So there is something new for everyone, and it's absolutely something I'll be covering here on this channel. I've seen some remarks in the comments on how the remaster looks and plays a lot like ESO. It's been a long time since I've played the online series, and I'm sure a lot has changed since then, but I do agree with this statement. From what I remember, ESO had a more simplistic, sleek, and minimalistic look to its menus and texts. While I personally don't mind the change, a notable thing with each Elder Scrolls installment is that they've always had their own unique look to them. Morrowind was different from Oblivion, Oblivion from Skyrim, and Skyrim from ESO. It made the games more distinct and personalized. However, with the menus, texts, and gameplay resembling Bethesda's long-standing online entry, it doesn't feel as unique as it should. Next, let's get into the specific features. For starters, the inventory/spell/character menu is still largely the same. Some features were consolidated and others were expanded upon, giving it more efficiency. Like for example, a very small but convenient detail is when buying and selling goods, you no longer have to flip back and forth between your inventory and the seller's. Next, the leveling was described as being a blend of what Oblivion and Skyrim both offered. Major and minor skills are still in, and attributes are still present. The leveling process is pretty much the same as it was in the original. Minor skill increases make smaller contributions to an overall level increase, while the majors make bigger contributions. You still have to sleep in order to trigger the level up menu, that hasn't changed either. Wherein the biggest difference lies though is in the attributes. In OG Oblivion, you selected 3 attributes to increase, and if you had actively used any of their overseen skills, you'd get some sort of point bonus. In the remake, it's now switched to something called virtue points. You get 12 each level, and you can put them into whichever attributes you'd like, minus luck. Each attribute can only be buffed up by 5 points per level. This mechanic is certainly different, and if anything, actually feels like it's making the game too easy. It seems like this function can be used to expedite the maxing out process, and achieving level 100 on your attributes probably won't take nearly as long to do now. It's something I need to play around with a little more to really decide on if I like it or not. Next, lockpicking feels more difficult in this version. I was playing on Xbox, and the control sensitivity is different, but there were locks I 100% would have easily picked in the OG version that just weren't happening here. Maybe the lockpicking skill was made to be more impactful. Maybe controllers aren't good for this minigame. Maybe it is actually more difficult, or maybe it's a me issue. I unfortunately didn't play around with the persuasion minigame. It's something I'll try tackling in my next playthrough. Finally, sneaking feels a lot easier. I think they buffed up the dark areas to be really invisible spots for enemy vision. The red dots on the compass show you where your enemies are, and now there's even a vignette on the screen for added immersion. That's about as far as I got in the game. I didn't really do a lot of one thing, just a little of a few different things. So far, I can understand a lot of people's criticisms and celebrations towards the game. The story and characters are Oblivion, but the look and feel are something else entirely. A lot of the aspects that once made the game more challenging have been reworked or taken out. If that was what you loved about the Elder Scrolls 4, then I can completely understand your frustrations. Everyone enjoyed the original for different reasons, and if your reason is gone in the remake, then what's left for you? Now, in the wake of these revamps and changes, you're left with a more accessible and user-friendly game. This is a title that many new players and old frogs can come back into and pick up with no problem. There are little barriers to entry now, and many of the aspects that made Oblivion tiresome or frustrating have been improved upon. Take for example third-person mode, a more concise player menu, dynamic combat, and diverse NPCs. I have friends that have either never played Oblivion or haven't touched the title for a long time who are now knee-deep inside of Cyrodiil. Overall, the game has changed. It's been remade and remastered. Things are different, yet they're also the same. For me personally, the novelty is still there, but I think it's fading quickly. I can see that the same bones are there. It's the same content, just with a better look to it. I'm someone who boots up Oblivion multiple times per week and knows most of the stories inside out. So of course, it was bound to hit me quicker. I can only hope that other fans find that same love and appreciation for the title. Those are my first impressions of the game. Let me know what content you want to see from me down below. Let me know your thoughts on the game so far, and until next time, keep on adventuring.